Hello and welcome to Victory Points. I'm Becca Scott, and this is a pod about interviews with tabletop gamers to highlight what points of their lives they feel like are victories, and how tabletop gaming has helped them to get there, as well as what they're playing lately and why they love it. And my guest today is Mr. Ivan Van Norman.
Hi, Becca.
Hi, Ivan.
Hello.
You went with a high pitch there.
No, I'm just so excited to see you.
I'm so excited to see you.
I know. We have, talk about victories. We've got some victories.
So many.
Yeah,
so
over
many.
the
Let me
years.
list a few of yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So, Ivan Van Norman is a Renaissance man.
Oh, my.
He is the creator of the children's book, The ABCs of RPGs, creator of the zombie-themed RPG game Outbreak Undead, owner of the media publishing company Hunters Entertainment, and now in partnership with Renegade Games, game master for the very successful horror RPG shows Sagas of Sundry and We're Alive Frontier, and a slew of other fascinating gaming credentials. We met while working on the show Game the Game at Geek and Sundry.
That's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for our glorious beginnings when we started Game the Game.
Glory to Ushnooks!
Glory! May he always reign supreme, and may his feast feed thousands upon millions.
That is a deep, deep cut of the pantheon of pastry and food-themed gods that we created.
To this day, I still recall that moment in chat in which that became a thing, and it was some point we wanted to phonetically sound out what the god of donuts would look like, and it was just what would that name be like? And then someone else said that, and then someone typed out the phonetic spelling of it, and I was like, that's it, right there.
Now, we should explain what the heck Game the Game used to be,
Right.
because it has evolved many times.
Yeah.
And
Especially for people who watch it on YouTube now, they may not know the history of where that came from.
exactly. It was a Twitch show where we would play a new game every week, but it was completely live, and we had a live chat that we were also watching as
Yeah.
people watched our playthrough of a
Yep.
game.
And even before then, we only were playing digital versions of board games.
Right.
Yeah.
For reasons
For
that involve not stepping on other properties that may have been owned by Geek and Sundry, and we won't say
At
anymore.
the time, yes. So, but that's the thing. It was just us getting involved with playing. I think we just played a lot of Tabletop Simulator
Yeah,
and
so
a
much.
whole lot of Star Realms.
I mean, I love Star Realms.
the
so,
best.
Yeah, I could play that all day. That's one of those. There are a few games that I prefer digitally,
Star Realms is one of them.
and Star Realms. It's a lot of card shuffling.
Yep, It's a lot of shuffling, and sometimes it's nice to have someone just rack up those sweet, cascading points for you, so you don't have to keep doing all the back and forth math, with the alliances.
Now, Star Realms, help me with this description here. You're card drafting and you're fighting to the death. Everybody starts with a certain amount of hit points, and whichever side is the last one standing wins.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Card drafting, it was kind of one of the early deck builders, but it had a very Ascension kind of feel to it, where you had a base deck and then you drafted based on what was in the flop, and
But
then you pulled it out.
of course, sci-fi, starship,
Right.
cruiser themed.
And only two things to worry about: health and damage. So,
Health and damage.
Yep.
That's all you
And
care
monies. Well, three things to worry about. So.
All right, first things first. Think back to your childhood, Ivan.
God.
What board games were in your house when you were a kid?
Oh my.
Wait, what was the horror there?
Oh God. I have very strong memories of two particular board games. The first one being Battleship. Battleship. And I remember playing with my mother on her giant California king bed. I think it was less than 10 at the time. And we were playing Battleship. And, we had good games as we were going together. But my mother also had one of those really Art Deco beds that had a mirror above it that was being held in place by slats.
Oh, God.
So first of all, dangerous as hell.
Yeah.
We lived in Oregon, so earthquakes weren't as much of a thing as they are in California.
Right, in California, you do not want anything sharp hanging over your bed.
No, but we literally had, I think, nine planes of mirrors.
Wow.
That were probably two and a half by 2.5 long.
I foresee where this is going. You
Yep.
cheater.
Yep. And yeah, I think when my mother found out that I was having a pretty significant win streak. She looked up and literally, I think I gave it away with her at one point because I remember like looking up and kind of giving it away to kind of show. But yeah, we didn't play board games on the bed anymore after that point.
You know what's interesting is that kids don't really have any sort of internal ethics until you teach it to them.
Right. And she was more, I remember her laughing about it. She was just more like surprised and cheeky, being like, you cheater. Like, she wasn't mad. So bless my mom for not having like any kind of, rage quitting kind of attitude around. She taught me very quick that it was just a fun thing. Like, don't do that. That's not why we play the game.
Yeah.
You don't do it to cheat.
And rage quits are no good, too. So she taught you an important lesson there.
Yeah, no rage quitting.
I can remember slipping a 50 every time it was my turn in Monopoly.
Oh, really?
When I was the banker. And then they stopped letting me be banker.
That's how you don't get to be banker anymore, is when you start
Unless
slipping
you're sly
50s.
about it.
Sleight of hand.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
you start having that bad, dirty feeling. Now, I should mention, back in the days of old Game the Game,
Right.
I was referred to as the cheat, and I hated this.
Uh-huh.
And it's still, whenever people do it now, I shut it down because it's my least favorite thing.
I remember when you vocally proclaimed that it's like, I don't like this. I don't want to be the cheater anymore. Like, all right, we're
From
done.
this point on, it's done.
It's
and then if
done.
anyone calls me that in your presence, I just look at you, Ivan, tell them.
She doesn't cheat, everybody. Becca's not a cheater. In fact, if anything, I'm closer to the cheater, mostly because I'm doing these power moves and I forget things.
Right,
So.
you're strategically interpreting the rules, and then you forget that the rule book explicitly said, hey, it breaks the game if you do this thing, don't do this
Just
thing.
Don't do that thing.
But
Don't
when
do
you're
that thing.
reading a bunch of rule books all the time, you know.
Yeah, you just tend to whatever the path of least resistance to winning is.
Yeah. Yeah, let me win with minimal effort. Work smarter, not harder.
But then I remember Hero Quest. Did you ever play Hero Quest?
Hero Quest.
It
No.
had it was literally like a micro RPG that was made by Games Workshop back in the day.
Ah, yes, I have
Had
heard of this.
Citadel miniatures, and it was literally a cooperative board game in which someone read the story. So it had like a mini GM that read the story, and then your adventurers did this little dungeon crawling adventure, and it had dice. It was a challenging game, if I remember last time I played.
Did the
So,
story reader also play, or were they just the reader of the story?
I'm gonna get hammered for this, but I cannot remember if it was just someone who read and placed the models when all the doors were open, and if they, because I know that someone had to roll for the enemies and had to move the enemies as well too. So I feel like there was a DM.
Gotcha.
I feel like there was.
And more importantly, did you paint your minis?
No, but we got dressed up in costumes.
What?
We wore had the wizard hat and wore the barbarian furs and we did the whole thing.
These were your school friends?
These are my buddies in middle school going into high school, kind of an attitude. It was hilarious. We had such a good time. We never got past the second dungeon or whatever. It was more about the act of dressing up and getting into the first game than it was actually about playing it. So, but that was early imagination times and goofing off with friends and doing what you should do with games, which is just create really fun moments and have those carry with you for the rest of your life.
All right, I have a question, and it's probably going to be a couple answers for this, but what game do you think you have logged the most hours on?
Gloomhaven.
Oh, really?
Oh,
In your
yeah.
adult life, Gloomhaven.
In my adult life.
You know, I was going to ask you about this later because I
Yeah.
heard you mention that you're playing through a Gloomhaven campaign, but let's
Yeah.
talk about it now.
Oh, man.
I have not played Gloomhaven. I know it is an epic campaign
It is a
game.
thing. It is an epic legacy game.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
tell me more things. How does it work? What would I love about it?
The thing and Gloomhaven's one of those specters, right? You've heard about it. It's got these great reviews, but some people have it, but a lot of people don't have it. And then a lot of people look and they're like, $100 or $120 for this big box. Yeah, let me tell you, the Gloomhaven is one of those games where if you enjoyed D&D just primarily for the combat mechanics of it, if you enjoy having special abilities, crunching through dungeons, knocking out bad guys, doing cool things, the game is that moment on rinse and repeat. It reminds me of, there was a game designer who was actually talking about Halo back in the day, and they said the best games take a wonderful moment and find a way to repeat that moment over and over again with fresh eyes.
Ooh, yes.
You know, and Gloomhaven, in my mind, does that. The whole point of it is that it does a diceless game. In order to do actions, you play 2 cards, and each card that you have as part of like your action deck has a top action and a bottom action. And so on a turn,
Do you always have access to the full action deck?
you always have access to the full action deck. You play the 2 cards, right? And you can play a top action and a bottom action. And there's an initiative, and you can pick which initiative of those 2 cards. So there's
Got
an
it.
endless,
So no luck.
no luck, endless amount of combinations that you can make based on this action deck. But after you've done that turn, they go in your discard pile. All right, and so you only have what's available left in your action deck to play for the next round. If you run out of cards in your hand, you basically can what they call like a long rest or a short rest. You can pick your discard pile up, but now a card is lost, like it goes into the lost, and so you can basically.
Oh, you lose a card forever every time
you
pick
lose
your
a card
hand
for that
back up?
scenario.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for that scenario, you lose a card for the entire game, for the entire scenario. Once you like basically to pick your discard back up.
Okay, so it shares some mechanics with Century Spice Road in that way, but
Yeah.
obviously much crunchier of a game.
And the difference is that every time you reshuffle, it goes away. So you can have your engine, and you pre-build your engine beforehand too, because your action deck is like, can be a huge amount of cards, but you have a card hand limit that your character has. And as your character level ups, you unlock new cards that go into your action deck, so you can rebuild your deck how you want it per scenarios.
So this is where the addiction part comes in.
Oh,
You
yeah.
want to level up
You want to level
hard.
up. And then the best part is they balance the game in such a way that once you're starting to feel a little bored of just playing this character, you're almost, in most times, you're about ready to retire that character anyway. And if you retire a character, like you fulfill its retirement conditions, you can unlock a box that wasn't available when you first started doing character creation. That's the legacy part of the game, right? You just unlock a character that you never even played before. It's just magically now available. You just open the box, and suddenly you have a whole new character, and you get to play that one now.
Oh,
you
so
know?
there are tons of characters in this box.
I
This
think there's
giant
I think
box.
it's like 12.
Okay.
And you start with 4.
And how many players are
5.
in your campaign?
So we have 3. It's a 2 to 4 game. So we just have 3. It's a buddy of mine, Zach Weschler, who we actually call our group Brunch Haven, because we should do it on like Sundays at brunch. It's like Phoenix's one day of the week that he can watch as much TV as he wants.
Oh, excellent. Well, we should mention you have a beautiful
Yeah.
ginger-haired angel named Phoenix Van Norman. Phoenix Shade Van Norman.
Right?
Yeah, the coolest name any kid has ever had.
I appreciate that. It's so nice to hear you say angel right now, because he's not been a little angel recently, but he is an awesome kid. So.
Well, while we're on this topic,
Yeah.
which could be its whole own podcast.
He has Baby Haven. When we play Gloomhaven, I set up a little map for him with minis, and he can play Gloomhaven next to us because he always wants to play. He's old enough now. He's like, Daddy, can I play board games with you?
Yeah, I want to do what Daddy does.
So I set up his little board game next to us.
That is so
He has
precious.
his own collection, Becca. He has his own private collection of board games.
Oh, fantastic. That
Yeah.
you have just pulled pieces from random games, or these are real?
No, these are
marketed
kids
for
that are
children's
meant
games?
for him, plus a couple of ones that have become his because he has opened them up and bent the cards enough that they're just now his at this stage. But it's his own shelf. Becca!
You're teaching him to bend cards, and then they become his.
I didn't think about it that way, but that's probably true.
But I am not one to judge or say anything because I imagine parenting is a rather difficult job.
It's just it's a joy. It's lovely. It's one of those things where it is like a game. You are met with new challenges, and you just got to find new ways to conquer them
Yeah.
every day.
And a lot of psychological manipulation.
Yeah, and on both ends. Yes.
Yes. Something I wanted to ask you about actually is how do you balance being a father, which is extremely time consuming, with you are very much an entrepreneur in the way you approach your freelance work because you do so many things. You're always creating new projects. Every time I turn around, you're doing something new. How do you balance that work and life while being a new father?
I don't know. When you figure it out, would you please tell me?
Sure. We should mention you have a YouTube series along with Trisha Hirschberger and David Moss known as Laser Cord.
Yep.
And it's called Nerds with Kids.
Nerds with Kids.
I put on an episode yesterday.
Isn't it fun? Aren't they adorable when they goof around together? So it's just an excuse for us to get together and watch and record like a podcast while we have the kids play.
Yeah, it's very much you guys trying to have a conversation about what adult things you're up to with like, oh wait, come back over here. What are you doing? Don't touch that. Or do touch that.
Like, ah! It's running across the screen. Yeah, no, it is definitely when you are in a space like this and you're working pretty actively to try to like make stuff happen when you're a content creator. You know, the more that you can integrate your life into your work, like seeing your friends, for example, like it's nice to, you know, go and hang out with you and also record a podcast. But then it's also just about finding that life of like, you need to make some sacrifices, but the important things you'll always make time for. Like I have a pretty hard cutoff now from when I can do stuff. Like I don't take calls at 9 p.m. anymore. I used to do that all the time.
Right.
I used to like take evening calls no matter what, like rain or shine, I'm available, let's go. But now I don't do phone calls past 6 p.m. And it hasn't affected my, you know, career in any like major way. It's just now, okay, from 6 to 9 or 6 to 10, you know, dinner and hang out with the kid. And if something's really important, like I'm on a deadline, then we'll work together and I'll pull a late night and get whatever needs to get done that needs to get done. But just as a rule, normally, like I set qualifiers for when and how I need to do things. I take Phoenix to daycare every morning, so we get an hour in the morning to do stuff. And, you know, that's usually our time to hang out and play a little bit or do breakfast. But then when he's dropped off, then I just go straight into making my time mean something.
Now, you told me you didn't have any advice, but that is excellent advice. It seems that having a kid and being a freelance entrepreneur, whatever you call it, that you have learned to compartmentalize more and make better use of your time when time is designated to a specific thing. That seems like great advice to me.
And it's hard to schedule, but, you know, my calendar it's like I color code it now. Ooh. To make it really clear. Like the blue is family time, like family things that we've scheduled. Red are meetings, yellow's for creative time. So, and that's the hard one. Honestly, that's the hardest one is I'm still learning how to like, okay, it's, you know, it's 12 to noon. I'm going to write, or I am going to work on development, or I'm going to work on a game or whatever it is. And it takes, and I celebrate writers who can just do this, to just like turn their brain off and turn on their writer brain and then just clickety clack.
Well, and the drugs help.
Drugs and booze help.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. You know, and for the 2 hours of writing I get done, the hangover's not worth it.
Right. Well, I will agree that Google Calendar is the best invention ever of all time.
Ever of all time. And Google Keep.
Ooh.
Google Keep is the best because they're getting rid of Inbox now, and all my reminders were on Inbox, and Google's decided that they can't place ads there anymore, so it's not worth it. So, bleh.
Got to be innovating. Google, you want us to stop talking trash? Put an ad on the show.
Way to bring it in. Way to bring it in, Becca.
Thank you. Only episode 2, but I'm working
Hustle
in the marketing
Google.
angle. Yeah.
Hustling the Google up.
All right. Now, you went to Chapman University, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
And you went there for film?
Yeah, I went there for film. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, which I like to call the last refuge of the great American hippie. It's where you can see them in their natural environment. Like, we're talking hacky sack in front of City Center.
Yeah, and they let them run free, too,
they
right?
let them,
No cages?
Yeah, they're free range. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's how you get the best weed, is when you free range them, you know? But they go and they have the Saturday market out there. It's like, and everything's either glass or clay or food. It's
but
like,
what I want to know about is,
it's Chapman.
You went to film school.
I went to film school.
What are you doing working in games?
So, yeah, I went down to film school because, like every other schmuck who comes to L.A., like I wanted to direct,
of
right?
Course.
And so I took my time in film school, but I slowly started to realize, like even in my freshman year, as I was going through it, I'm like, wow, I would much rather play video games than watch a movie. Well, like all of my peers around me were like, oh, have you seen this movie? You're like, what do you think of this? Like they're in it. They're in the space. They're learning. They're absorbing. It's what you do in college.
Right.
And I'm like, meh, you know. I just got done playing like Grim Fandango. What do you think about that? You know, or just like I would be playing these storyline centric games, but I always liked interactive content.
Sure.
More than I liked watching like a flat 2D screen that had a story being fed to me. And it
well, now with what's the Black Mirror episode?
I know. Yeah, with Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch,
Yeah.
yes.
Which
Now they
knew it was coming. It's
mm-hmm.
coming.
They're coming closer and closer to one another.
Yep. And it just kind of became a thing where after graduating college, I still tried. I unfortunately, it was right during the recession. I graduated 2007, 2008, and that's when the writer's strike hit. And when like the recession was like the early, I guess you can say mid 2000s recession was kind of a big thing. So there was no work. I like worked in the mail room at DreamWorks for like a year and a half.
Sure. Oh, wow. That's fun.
Like mail work. And then I even worked for a brief time. Like, God, I was even in a call center for like 6 months,
Well, what film school students don't realize is they're not going to get a job on a Hollywood movie right out of college anyway.
In fact, the mailroom was like a big win because even before then, I was doing QA at Activision for Guitar Hero 3, like playing Guitar Hero for 40 hours a week.
So the dream, living the dream.
The super dream, yeah. Oh, God, QA testing is awful. But I never really applied my degree until we started working together at G&S because I finally found out that like making games and playing games was much more entertaining than film school. But now there's this great world that we're somehow involved in where it's like you can make content about games and you can make videos about games. And oh, by the way, role-playing games when people put in costumes and like thrown in front of a really awesome like atmosphere like Sagas of Sundry. Wow, people really respond well to that. It's weird and it's wonderful and it's lovely. But yeah, I had no idea.
Right?
No clue.
Isn't it awesome when the thing that you have student loans for can actually help you with what you're doing now?
Oh man, and boy do I. So yeah, it was Chapman wasn't cheap, but it also gave me a foundation of friends that I would lean on in years later. In fact, in film school, the people who would come to me and be like, well, is there any point in going to film school? Yes, because actually college in general is a safety net to fail.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Dig into that, because I love the idea of embracing failure, as we were talking about just before we started recording here.
Right.
So what do you mean by a safety net to failure?
So in college, you can try things and you can attempt them with friends. And if you fail, you will not become homeless. You will still usually have meals, okay? Usually.
I mean, if you can eat the cafeteria food.
Right. But hey, that's food. You literally have as much time you want to put into a week to hang out with the people that you hopefully will spend a large portion of your life with to work on projects that are passionate to you. It's really like an artisanal, the way that like, if you were going to be doing a blacksmith apprenticeship, and you're hanging out with the blacksmith, but the difference is that instead of having a master that you learn from, you're all just learning together. And since you're all learning together on kind of an equal level, some of you are it's just going to be a jumble of failures. It's just going to be a jumble of like trying stuff. Oh, this doesn't work. And then just roll with it. And then occasionally you go to class.
Right. That's really interesting because I have found recently in my adult life, I have been attempting to fail more.
Oh, okay.
Because for me, perfection or the idea of perfection or striving for perfection has always been a thing and therefore can be paralyzing. And so my advice to any artist or any person in general is don't be afraid to make an absolute fool of yourself by saying yes to starting a podcast when you know nothing about podcasting.
Because why not? And the good news is that you're far enough along where you do have a bit of a support network to be able to allow things to be able to come into it and to get that appropriate amount of like feedback and constructive feedback that you're hoping to be able to move forward with.
Are you referring to YouTube comments? Because I do not look at those.
No. Work with the people who you want to work with,
Excellent.
not with the people who want to or are vying for your attention, so to speak.
Yes.
Which, to be fair, I don't take that advice terribly well either. I enjoy whatever the zeitgeist is going into it. But I also try to teach myself that when listening to criticism, look between the lines. Don't look at what it says per the words. Like if someone says, wow, that wasn't fun at all, then instead of saying, well, okay, that hurts me because they say it wasn't fun, I say, well, was it not engaging? Like, was there an element part that they didn't like? Like, I try to deconstruct what it is so that I can isolate that element. And if
Absolutely. And if they could phrase their hateful or aggressive comments in a way that was more specific,
right,
it would help us all.
And if you're going to be critical, be specific on how critical you're going to be. But yeah, we stumbled. Like when we first started Game the Game, like we were working on it.
I have no idea what you mean.
Oh my God, Becca, did we stumble? We were figuring it out, but we were having a good time. And that's really all it came down to. And I am extremely proud of you for going out there and just trying stuff.
Ivan, I'm proud of you every day. Now, I have so many more things to ask you about. I want to talk about Hunter's Entertainment. I want to talk about ABCs of RPGs. We should maybe talk about...
ABCs of D&D now.
Oh, ABCs of D&D is your second children's book. But before we do, we're going to go to a short break. Enjoy this word from our sponsor. Welcome back. I'm here with my guest, Ivan Van Norman, who is the creator of multiple children's books, the ABCs of RPGs and the ABCs of D&D, a creator of Outbreak Undead and Hunter's Entertainment, and so many other things such as GMing Sagas of Sundry and We're Alive Frontier.
Yay.
Hi, Ivan.
Hi, Becca.
All right.
I did the baritone for you this time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whew, I needed that. Well, let's talk about, I believe, your first published game, Outbreak Undead.
That was Outbreak, and back then it was Hunter's Books and Apparel, because we actually had to fund our first book with an apparel line.
Oh.
Yeah. Or they were,
so the apparel paid for the book?
Simultaneously. Like we printed the book, and we were also printing T-shirts, because we had a cool trademark, Your Zombie Survival Plan Will Fail, and it just seemed like a cool all-purpose T-shirt to sell.
Yeah, you don't have to have ever played the game to have that T-shirt be relevant.
And it was also advertisement for the game.
Well, so my understanding, let me try and do your pitch that you're so good at.
Yeah.
So Outbreak Undead is your zombie survival plan because you play as an enhanced version of yourself, and all of your stats are dictated by your real-world knowledge. And typically, the GM will start you off wherever you are right then and there.
That's the most fun. Like, I enjoy sessions that are like, day zero, stuff's happening right now, throw you into the boiling pot, so to speak, and see what comes out of it. But yeah, it is a traditionally, I guess if we're going to use game terms for this, it is a survival horror simulation RPG.
Simulation RPG. What is the distinction there, and what else falls in that category?
So simulation, for all intents and purposes, dictates that it is you can appropriate rules as much as you want to try to make it as much of a realistic experience as you like, and what that really comes down to is that it's crunch, so if you want to have a game that's just run and gun, shoot 'em, pow pow pow, like let the bodies hit the floor kind of a situation,
not the game for you.
Well, there's an arcade mode but it has like 12% of the rules that are inside of the game.
Yeah. Well, what I was impressed by is the rules system you created for it. There's a lot of dice. Yeah, there's different colored dice for different mechanics, but the dice represent things like depletion, your initiative, damage, and difficulty. And these are all elements that can go into it. So when I say simulation, I literally mean if you want to simulate a zombie apocalypse scenario, then there are enough rules in this book that you can do things like hit location, gangrene, infections, strongholds, like stats for your strongholds, different types of injuries leading out from bone infection or bone injury all the way out to like thermal damage. Ugh, I hate when my bones get infected.
I hate when that marrow, deep marrow burn. No one likes that.
So I sort of see a Venn diagram between RPG players and tabletop board game players.
Yeah.
And then there's this cross section. You're very much in both of those circles.
Right, yeah.
And I think this game does an interesting job, Outbreak Undead, of appealing to both of those crowds, would you say?
It does. I think, actually, there's a third Venn diagram that pulls in there, too, and it's people who love survival horror.
Ooh.
It's like the people who really are looking for an experience that is not kind to them. Or what it does, maybe not kind isn't appropriate. It doesn't hold back any punches, you know. So in the same way that Call of Cthulhu, when you make your character in Call of Cthulhu, you're the best you're going to be at the beginning of that session because it's all downhill from there.
Yeah, insanity is coming.
It's coming. Yeah, it's just not about if, it's just when and how. In the same way, Outbreak's the same boat. It's just about how you're going to die.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And
on the flip end of the spectrum, Kids on Bikes is totally storytelling rules light.
Now, Kids on Bikes had different writers, and
we published it.
Worked to publish it.
Yeah. So Doug Levidansky and Jonathan Gilmore wrote Kids on Bikes, and I picked up that game system from them at Gen Con a couple of years ago, and we brought it to market for them. That was actually our first acquired title we acquired that title, and then it was immediately our first published game through Renegade.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Renegade is incredible. They do so many games.
So many games. So many games.
Can you shout out a few that listeners might know that are their board game staples?
So Renegade's big staples are things like Clank.
Love Clank.
Lanterns they
Yes.
had, which are tabletop
Our
premiere.
episode of Will Wheaton's Tabletop was Lanterns.
with
yes.
Renegade. They have what are they? The Tea Garden Society. They have that little. They did the Scott Pilgrim board game.
Right.
Let's see what they also have.
And Lanterns is such a beautiful game.
Oh, it's awesome.
It's all about the cherry blossom ceremony and little paper lanterns on the lake.
Yep.
And I
You're
don't
just
know.
matching sets.
Did I ever officially apologize for how aggressive I came off in that tabletop episode?
You were awesome, Becca. Like, you were great. There's still gifts to this day of that stuff. But no, you were after that trophy, and no one blamed you for it.
You know,
so.
As a woman in this space, I feel like I need to make it okay for all women to be as aggressive as they want to be.
No, I learned a lot in our games playing together. It's that, it is okay for people to want to win.
Yeah, and we had to make a truce at one point.
We did.
Okay,
because you were beating my butt.
Well, it just came to this thing where we'd have two guests, and we'd be playing a 4-player game, and you and I, because we wanted to be polite to our guests, would always go for each other's throats. Until it was like, we got to stop going for each other's throats.
For a while, it wasn't even about the guests anymore. It was just about, like, is Becca going to beat Ivan or is Ivan going to beat Becca? And we had to,
And which of these guests they brought on will become the Kingmaker?
I know. I think at one point we were actually leveraging the guests against each other for a while.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
For anyone who is not familiar with the term, Kingmaking is when a player that is probably not going to win has enough weight to throw around that can basically choose which other player will win.
Yeah, and they can throw it. It's basically, for intensive purposes, it's like the fourth or third player throwing the match to the second into the first.
Yep. And as long as they do it to beat up on whoever's in first place, not for out-of-game personal reasons, then it's fair.
This would come across in games that were ostensibly not diplomatic at all. Like, there's no diplomatic elements at all to these games. There's like engine builders or whatever.
We found a way.
We did.
What do you think about the mechanic of king making in general? Do you prefer a game where that's not an option?
I think it's hard to avoid. The problem is I don't think people put in king making unless it's something like a very strategic, like a betrayal game, or something that is like has diplomatic elements to it, like a secret Hitler or a coup or a resistance or Avalon, something like that.
Sure.
But it just in, like, any of the games that you have here, Colt Express or any standard kind of sit down 4X or explore games, it's just I think sometimes it's hard to avoid in the mechanics, but the more you can curb it, the better. It just all comes down to, like, how do you win, right? And so someone's got to win. Other people have to lose. So how do you define what that means?
Or everyone wins or everyone loses.
Right. That's one of the reasons I like 3 versus 1 games so much.
I was just going to ask you about a specific 3 versus 1 game to switch gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I was weaseling my way out of jury duty. And you filled in for me on Game the Game and played Valor and Villainy.
Valor and Villainy.
Yeah.
Which I had no idea was a 3 versus 1.
Right.
Originally.
So you got to be the big bad.
Got to be the big bad. And I think that's the only. So sorry to start with one of the things that is negative about 3 versus 1 games.
Well, I was just going to ask you whether you like them or not, because I think people have pretty clear feelings one way or the other.
I love them, but I also know that sometimes 3 versus 1 games are not fun when you're the 3. You know?
Oh.
3 versus 1 games are usually the best when you're the 1. Like Spectre Ops, Hunt for the Ring.
Let's see, the Attack on Titan game.
Attack on Titan game. Yeah, it's really fun when you're the Titan.
Yes.
Right? Right? Yes.
Well, personally,
see the sparkle.
I love to be. Oh, did you see?
Yeah, there was sparkle in there.
The sparkle of evil in my eye. Well, personally, I can be impressed with a cooperative game, but I like a competitive game because I want there to be a winner.
Yes.
But I find a cooperative game is good when you're with new gamers or very casual gamers that they're not about going for the jugular.
And sometimes I also learned that competitive gamers can also have a great time when they want to take a back seat and just chill for a night. Competitive games are good for I'm just want to chill for a night. Yes. Sometimes I just want to sit back with a vodka soda and play a cooperative game and not have to worry about how am I going to win? And Red and more, it's more like, how are we going to win?
Right.
You know?
Vodka soda, do you put a twist in there? Do you put a lemon?
No, I'm trying so hard to wean myself off of soda. A club. So it's all sparkling water club soda right now for me.
And all the vodka.
And
more
Cassandra's
vodka, less soda, and that'll help you wean.
Right. Yes. More vodka, less soda. Cassandra's on a full keto diet right now.
Oh,
so we have a sugarless household right now.
Yes,
so,
Cassandra being Phoenix's mother and
mom.
your partner.
My partner, yes.
Yes, for people who don't know.
That's okay, letting out all the personal information about my sugarless household right now.
Yeah,
so.
I love that. Okay, well, back to Valor and Villainy. So this is
it was fun.
Skybound games.
It was super fun.
And so did you feel like everybody had, so it's definitely.
I thought it was pretty balanced, yeah. So everyone had agency. It wasn't player elimination if you died. Actually, having the players die is a part of the mechanic.
Right, because it helps you to grow stronger as the evil wizard overlord. Mordak?
Mordak, yeah. Yeah, he's so the point is the villain is supposed to collect player bodies. That's the whole point of it.
Oh,
the more he does so, the stronger he becomes. And so it's I thought it was great because it happily had that little bit of a balance. And the board was small enough that it wasn't like Hunt for the Ring, man. It's so hard for the Nazgul to find Frodo, because that board is big.
Right.
know.
And so I looked over the rule book for this game, and what I liked about the setup was there wasn't a board. The cards themselves that you flip and explore are the board.
Yeah, and it can be limited actually in the game that we played on Game the Game. They found all the shrines really early in the game. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. But they found all the shrines really early, and so they had a very limited ground in which to move around. And so, with normally a bigger board would allow Mordak to move around a little more, but in this circumstance, it's actually really helped me as Mordak because they didn't have nearly as much gear as they needed. They activated the fight super early, and they didn't have as much stuff as they were hoping to have.
Gotcha. The final boss fight.
The final boss fight.
Oh,
yeah, because
okay.
what happens in the game is the players have to find 3 shrines, and then that activates Mordak to come into the game. And if the players kill Mordak, then they win. Mordak just basically has to only kill 3 players with his power level in order to win.
Sure. And so I know that Mordak is a spirit until those things are found.
Yes.
Was it at all boring being Mordak?
No, because the minions are there. You just throw minions at them.
Throw minions.
Yeah, actually, that was the crux of my game is I invested so much of my experience points into minion summoning because I'm like, I'm going to make the minions work for it, you know? And so I leveled up all of my dice because every player has essentially a stat line that has like weak, medium, and strong dice for each one. And I leveled up Mordak's summoning line of his stat to summon monsters as much as I could. But, that was all useless once my corporeal form was upon the board.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Interesting. Now, so Kickstarter,
It's running now.
Valor and Villainy is a Kickstarter game currently running.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of experience with Kickstarter. To switch gears yet again,
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk to me about that, because I know that you used to run campaigns as your
That's actually how I got involved with GNS.
Oh.
As I ran the Tabletop Season 3 Indiegogo campaign.
Oh, go on.
So-
And Indiegogo or Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Which? Why?
Well, for board games, it's all Kickstarter nowadays.
Right.
Indiegogo's mostly film, and it's mostly physical products. Indiegogo's been taking a backseat on the board game space. They even hired a guy to try to help bring them in for a little bit, and it's just they couldn't find the penetration.
Nope, sorry, you don't have it. Now, for anyone living under a rock, Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform, but if you found this podcast, you probably know
You
that.
probably know.
Indiegogo is as well, and the main difference being with Kickstarter, if you do not reach the goal you set, everybody who donated gets their money back.
Right.
With Indiegogo,
There's a flex funding option.
right, and I believe the
They
platform
take a
takes
higher percentage.
a higher percentage if you don't meet your goal. Right.
Yeah, it's it's an option, but I'm all about the go big or go home. But now people are gaming even that for Kickstarter as well too. I can't even tell you the amount of campaigns I've seen that set their campaigns at the lower than what they actually need to fund, and so just because they want to get that quick funding.
Right. You gotta at least get the money that people promised,
get the
and
money.
then you can put up a second campaign.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna get into the philosophy of crowdfunding games. Now some people contribute this ability of being able to crowdfund online
Right.
to the renaissance of tabletop gaming and board gaming, and then I'm starting to see some naysayers saying, well, now these big companies that have the money to produce their own game are doing it anyway as a pre-order.
It's the best money, Becca. Honestly,
Best money?
It's the best money because I'll try to make this, and this is going to be a whole lot of business structure 101, but I'll try to make it super quick so as not to bore the hell out of your audience.
You got to start with 101 for me because I
Right.
don't know.
So when people sell board games, they usually are a store. They're buying it from a store, right? Or they're buying it online.
Sure.
So a store always buys a game from a distributor or directly from the publisher. So then that distributor either buys it from the people who make it, and that is the thing, they call it 3-tier distribution. So when a person makes a board game and it goes from a shop, it usually goes to a distributor who then sells it to a retailer who then sells it to a customer.
Right.
Means
But
they
if the product doesn't sell out, then sometimes the deal is Target or whoever can say,
buy it.
oh, your product didn't get sold out. You got to buy it back from us. Give us our money back.
Yeah, so if it doesn't move, that's what the consignment essentially is, and that's how the magazine used to do. Actually, what they would do is they would rip the covers off and send the covers back.
Wait, what magazine?
All magazines.
All magazines?
All magazines for a long time. If they didn't, if a weekly trade didn't sell onto it, they would rip the cover off and send the cover back, and they would get reimbursed for the cost of that purchase. And all that,
so many trees dead with coverless magazines. Sitting in rooms.
And the whole reason they did that is because that was a way to incentivize retailers to overstock in case the demand for the trade was high. So because otherwise, if you're like, well, I don't know if this is going to sell 10 copies or 100 copies, I'm going to buy 10 copies. Right. But then the demand for it's closer to 75. Then it's like, okay, well, now that's 65 copies they didn't sell because the retailer was too scared to buy more.
Right. So for those people creating a board game, do consignment, just don't spend the money yet.
There you go.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
so the reason why Kickstarter is the best money is because it's a direct-to-consumer market. It's being sold directly to the consumer the same way that if it was buying directly on their website. And the money that Kickstarter makes, that percentage that Kickstarter takes, is significantly less than what a distributor or a distributor or even a retailer buys it from.
Gotcha.
Right? Because once they've all exchanged hands, it's a pretty small margin.
Right.
You know? So
yeah, cut out all the middle peoples.
but the challenge,
Meeples,
the
some
meeples,
call
yes, and it is literally cutting out the middleman. That's really what it comes down to. Kickstarter cuts out the middleman, and it gives publishers the direct money in order to fund it. And even better, they kind of have an idea of what the expectation of the game's going to have.
Right, your fans
know?
can directly comment, and you will probably see it saying, "Oh, this is cool, but I wish it had this feature."
Yeah, and that's nice on a creative side. But I'm talking about like if you have a Kickstarter that has 3,000 units sold. Then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to print definitely at least 3,000, but probably more. And I'll make a projection based on how well the Kickstarter was to sell it in third-tier distribution. And then
And third tier being in a retail store.
Retail store.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then the only other challenge, though, the thing that people have been running across, it's a huge issue with Kickstarter lately, is that you do get a lot of like marketing hype when the Kickstarter's done. And then by the time the game actually drops, like 6 to 8 months later, they lose a lot of that momentum.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, that's a thing that I've noticed not just with games, but the same with TV and film.
Yeah.
It's just that because we as consumers have access to so many different types of entertainment and media and gaming and visual stimuli,
Yeah.
that we're always on to the next new thing. Like
So quickly.
Yeah. Is it? Games, I have my core games that I love and I'll always play, but now it's whenever it's a game night, I'm always trying to make everybody play the new
game.
thing
Yeah.
that I got. That's my shiny new toy.
Yeah.
Same with TV shows. I mean, aside from Good Will Hunting, I can't tell you what movies I go back and rewatch because I feel like I have to be up on the new
thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a lot of cardboard nowadays. It's so much.
So much cardboard.
It's so much cardboard and
so much just the cardboard surrounding what
Yeah.
you've punched out.
And Kickstarter is also a great market as well too because this is the analogy I like to use all the time. You can make a really crappy web series for $50,000
Or less.
or less.
I've done it.
$10,000. You know, so let's say
Try two.
That's being resourceful. You can make a pretty crappy web series for $50,000, but you can make a pretty dope board game for $50,000.
Yeah,
you know
you
what I mean?
can.
And it's just
Totally.
it's just because a lot of it's art and creative. It's not like someone's going out and sourcing plastic and making like the new technological know-how where there's a whole lot of like trying to optimize parts, like all the engineering that's involved, like, you know, years of development, and nobody gets their stuff because the creators didn't factor a thing when they launched it on crowdsourcing or whatever.
Right.
Which is pretty common, you know.
Now, here's a potential con, and let me know if this
Yeah.
is totally wrong, of crowdfunding platforms for gaming. It seemed like at first it could be a way for the indie developer
Right.
that doesn't have any games out there to get seen by the masses and get fans that didn't even know they would be fans to lift this thing up. With the inundation of developers as well using this platform, does that make it harder for the little guy?
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's still an equal opportunity platform. Whether you're little or whether you're CMON, you can put your thing up on Kickstarter. CMON is obviously bringing a lot more muscle as far as marketing and ideas and concepts in there. But they're also bringing a huge audience to the platform as well, too.
Ooh, good point.
You know? And there's a lot of people who, as they continue to bring new people to the market, they'll have an opportunity to find some of these indies. And back when Kickstarter was indie and only the new, no one had heard of projects were on side of there, I mean, the amount of people on Kickstarter were also a lot less.
Right.
It was a much smaller pool in which to draw from. So I think like anything else, the market grows and a platform like that grows with the market. So, you know, there'll be billions of dollars spent on Kickstarter last year and probably this year.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, we're going to make the mainstream recognize that we are legit because we spend a lot of money.
Right? And Kickstarter made more in board games last year than it did in video games.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By huge margins, you know?
Why do you think that is?
I think because, honestly, it's that same thing I mentioned earlier. Like, you need $500,000 to really make a video game that people feel like they can go and play and support
Right.
and
You
be
need
excited
a
about.
team of developers.
You need a team of
versus
developers,
a team of 2 or 3.
artists, all this other stuff. Or either that, or you're going to be waiting years for that thing to come out.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there was that old documentary from 5-6 years ago, Indie Game, that talks about video games.
Yeah.
And yep, it's a time-consuming process
It
when you do it
is.
alone. Whereas a tabletop game, Well, that's just what, year of your life? Come on, nothing.
Yeah, no, nothing. Just producing it, putting it all together. And like I said, some people like Renegade, because they have a team together and they have a lot of developers that they work with, they can have a pretty huge return cycle.
Yeah.
So
And very kind people at Renegade.
Yes.
Cool.
I do
publishing company.
not hate on big publishers for using Kickstarter as part of their market. I also am in that boat where I don't think retailers are being screwed, because that amount of money is now going on Kickstarter versus going into their stores.
Right.
you know?
And, I don't think the people who would buy a game probably as a gift from, well, maybe friendly local game stores are hurt by it more than Target, but those people, it's just bringing a new audience that wasn't there before, as you mentioned, to the platform in general. Yeah. All right. Well, I keep mentioning it, so we got to dive into it a little bit because
What is it, Becca?
last night I watched a little clip that a mother sent you on Twitter that was this little girl, I'm going to guess maybe 6 years old, maybe less, and this mother had sent a clip to you of this little girl. They were going back and forth. She'd say a letter, and then her daughter would say a letter, and the whole rhyme that went with it, because you wrote the book, the ABCs of RPGs, which is exactly what it sounds like, going through the alphabet, and A is for
Adventure. May you always be. Oh, I'm sorry. In the D&D one, it's A is for adventure. Our journey has just begun.
that's the ABCs of D&D.
Yeah.
And Wizards of the Coast picked that up, right?
They picked that up. Yeah. So, previously when it was ABCs of RPGs, A is for adventure. May you always be on one. But D&D approached me after we put the book on Kickstarter, and then it had its run on ThinkGeek for a while, and I was selling direct for a long time, and I was on Amazon for a long time, and they
well, not a long time, because this has all been in the 4 years I've known you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. It really only had about 2 years before D&D wanted to snag it up. So yeah, we had a great conversation. They loved it. They really want to get into children's stuff. They put out their coloring book this year as well too, but they also put out like those little adventure books that the Endless Quest, Endless Journey. Oh man, I'm having a hard time remembering it now. But they're basically like adventure books for kids, YA novels for D&D kids.
Oh, so cool.
So cool.
Now, what has that experience been like for you? Does it feel huge? Is this something you ever dreamed of?
So many people have it now. Like, I thought we were doing great when I was just pushing it out on my own. But like seeing it at like Barnes and Noble, and like I mean hell, even Felicia like tweeted me and it was like, look at what I found.
Day.
Yeah, Felicia Day,
who originally created Geek and Sundry.
Yeah, and her little quotes on the book as well too. And she was like at the like Amazon bookstore, and she saw it on a shelf, and it just seems like it's everywhere now.
So you republished it,
we redid the art. So what I like to say is that we took the ABCs of RPGs that everybody loved, and we retooled it and provided new art and copy that would be delightful for people who are big fans of Dungeons and Dragons.
Gotcha. So both are still available.
No.
Okay. So ABCs of D&D is it now?
Is it now?
Okay. Yeah. Amazing. That's what I was wrong on.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry.
It's fine. No, ABCs of D&D is where it is because we are now Hunters Entertainment.
Yeah.
Is now a licensee of Dungeons and Dragons for that book series.
Did you ever think you would be a publisher
of a children's book with Dungeons and Dragons? No. If you had asked the little boy who was playing Hero Quest and donning a little tiny wizard's hat that he would eventually sell a children's book to D&D, I would say he had no goddamn clue. And it's weird because I don't even I never take the time to step back and actually realize it and think about it. But hearing you say it, it's like, yeah, I guess that's kind of a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
I'm just like, okay, well, great, we did that, and that's fun, and I'm really happy people like it. That made it worth it, though. I'm pointing to my phone because I'm referring to Twitter.
That thing.
Yeah. That little girl reading it, because that really set it for home for me. It's like, wow, parents are reading this to their kids.
Well, and what it gives me shivers about it is that you are helping to inspire the next generation of nerds. You are beaming right now. How does that feel?
It's actually really emotional.
Yeah.
I didn't really honestly think that was going to be like, I want to make things worth participating in. And when you are a parent and you know that like little things can have big effects on kids, I don't know. I guess I'm just really I'm humbled and I'm grateful that a little girl can literally memorize my book and have the biggest smile on her face when she's talking to her mom about it. You know, it's really special. So.
Well, that seems like the perfect place to end. Thank you so much, Ivan Baron Van Norman, man of many talents. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Becca.
And thanks so much to our audience, whoever you might be in the future, because we're not even up anywhere yet, but we will be by the time you're listening to this. So please subscribe on whatever platform you found us on and share this podcast with a friend. See you next time.